yeah, frame rate, that's what I'm waiting for. It's all about, woo!
Serious Sam 2 has always been that one game from Croteam's catalog which didn't see much modding activity. With no SDK or advanced tools for their Serious Engine 2 available publicly, there are limitations on what you're able to accomplish compared to other engines. The lacking popularity of Serious Sam 2 was another valid reason for modders to stick with the first game instead. So in other words, this game's modding scene was doomed from the start. Still, modding tools do exist for Serious Sam 2. While small in numbers, a few noteworthy efforts have surfaced over the years. Initially, this video was going to cover all the Serious Sam 2 mods that I found interesting. After working on this for a bit, I realized it'd be a huge undertaking for one video, so I've decided to split it into 2 parts. This first video will focus on the projects that involve Nathan Brown, known in the community as DwK. Formerly known for his work on the infamous classic mod Parse Error, DwK managed to get close with Croteam. He negotiated the idea of making a new version of this mod for Serious Sam 2, but the available tools weren't enough. Him and Croteam's Alan Ladovac were already friends at the time, but I never expected him to hand over the flippin' source code. As a result, DwK could achieve way more than what would otherwise be possible. He then released Parse Error 2, though that was more of an internal name. The official title was InSamnity 2. In 2012, Croteam hired DwK on, and is now a part of the, Croteam? Can I say that? 15 years after the release of Serious Sam 2, he expressed an interest in further updating the game. Him and a small team of community modders would then band together to create Update 2.090. That update is the last subject of interest in this video. For now, let's get started with DwK's first Serious Sam 2 mod, InSamnity 2. InSamnity 2 is a largely customizable experience that adds significantly more enemy spawns to the base game. On top of that, you can choose what multiplier of enemies you want, up to a maximum of 100 times the standard rate. That is insane. Good thing you have the firepower necessary to deal with it. All weapons unlocked, infinite ammo. Oh, these are toggleable options, by the way, but with what goes down here, I'd think it's a necessity. Oh yes, and of course, dual wielding. It would be the first mod for the game to implement this feature, which several other future mods would follow along with. Many fans will know that this feature was actually scrapped in Serious Sam 2's development, so seeing it working here for the first time was pretty cool. Additionally, all weapons have alternate firing modes, but you might have to enable it first by binding it to a key. Bringing back the beta's launching saw blades and beam gun were a nice touch. Also, I believe this is the first and only time Croteam released their Xbox enemy models on PC commercially, now as the mod has been bundled with the game on Steam. InSamnity 2 also includes a couple levels from the first encounter, redesigned in Serious Sam 2. The concept of playing classic Serious Sam levels in newer engines is a tired concept at this point, but back then it was a fun novelty. Now, despite its accomplishments, InSamnity 2 is, unfortunately, really boring. You might have to play it yourself to understand this, because on first glance it does look like a blast. Serious Sam 2 might not have had the best gameplay formula, but playing this is like the bare minimum. It's an endless slaughterfest, which is fun for a few minutes maybe, but gets old fast. You know those people who haven't played a shooter game and call them mindless? I imagine this is exactly what they see in their heads. This mod is a strong representation for the engine's capabilities, but gameplay-wise it's not much beyond a fancy gimmick. I'm not trying to slam InSamnity 2, it's a commendable effort all the same. I don't think even DwK expected people to play these sorts of mods for very long. His other efforts in the future would show that he has far more to offer. As you can see, I played this mod in cooperative with my friend Atlassian. This session reminded me of a familiar issue to Serious Sam 2's online play. It, without modification, requires you to be within the same region as other players. For example, me and him both live in North America, so we can connect. But even then, there are severe latency issues. A lot of the gameplay will be focused on shooting time-paradoxal enemies who are no longer located at where you see them. At one point, the latency broke the game so bad that I had lost my weapons, and began watching a clone of myself A-pose, while having to protect him from the onslaught of guts. Serious Sam Forever. So, does this mod have anything to do with Duke Nukem Forever? Well, not really, no. Serious Sam 2 often made remarks about the long-considered vaporware status of Duke Nukem Forever at the time, and this mod's title was a nod to that.
Duke? Freeman? Quake Guy? All amateurs. I'm the only serious action hero out there.
Yeah, this is where that line came from. Before I go any further, I should explain why I'm not playing in widescreen for this mod. When Serious Sam 2 was released on Steam, Croteam reintroduced it with a couple of patches, one change being a proper widescreen mode. Unfortunately, the Steam release isn't compatible with all mods. The old disc-based version of the game did have a widescreen mode, but it was a bit fake. It just crops the screen, and as a result cuts off half the weapon's view model. The same issue exists in the classic games before Croteam Steamified those as well. I've patched it to the latest pre-Steam build of the game. Anyways, Serious Sam Forever has a lot of stories behind it. My favorite one is this disproven rumor of how its development was canned because of a review by Zeb89.
And here it looks like he's chopping vegetables. No, look, you gotta look at this. It looks like Sam is chopping vegetables.
Serious Sam Forever's development started with a group who called themselves the Prophets of Sam, who had DwK as their lead programmer. According to their archived website, their project was a total conversion. The way they promoted it, however, was a bit cryptic. Despite following it back in the day, I wasn't sure what the mod was about then, and I'm not entirely sure today either. From what I've gathered, it was an over-the-top remake of the first encounter in Serious Engine 2. This was in development between the years of 2006 till 2010. You know what came out between that time? Serious Sam HD. So why bother with Serious Sam Forever if HD exists? I don't know, but one of them tried backing it up with this.
Serious Sam Forever is a completely different game from Serious Sam HD, and they should not be compared. If you want to know what the differences are, then just try it out.
You see what I mean when I said their project was cryptic? At least it'll come out, right? I mean, after all, they said this.
Of course Serious Sam Forever is not going to be vaporware. I'll get you for even suggesting that.
You know, I remember thinking back then, we might never get Duke Nukem Forever, but at least we'll have this. Hilarious irony. Despite the confusing press surrounding the mod, I remember people being excited for Serious Sam Forever at the time. If the first encounter remake angle didn't interest you, well then there was the multiplayer. Serious Sam 2 didn't launch with any competitive multiplayer modes. It was eventually updated with Deathmatch, and I've never played its Deathmatch before, but I've been told it was rather basic. Serious Sam Forever would then fill the hole by having its own in-depth experience. It came with a new Capture the Flag mode, as well as Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, and 3-Team Deathmatch. As you may know, the multiplayer beta and subsequent multiplayer demo were all that had officially released from the project. Upon the release of its multiplayer beta, Zeb89 would post his opinion of it to YouTube, which was, all jokes aside, a big deal. He was a well-known content creator back in the day who often recorded and made compilations of his ace gameplay in Serious Sam Deathmatch. Over the years, he would slowly shift over to an Italian-speaking audience, which is why he's rarely brought up in this community anymore. Nonetheless, if the era's most well-known competitive Sam player had complaints, well, it's not a great sign. I have to admit his video on the beta mostly focused on nitpicks related to the base game, rather than the mod itself.
One last thing. Is it just me, or is that box just a tad little too large? I mean, you could almost fit Sam in it.
Now, Zeb might have been a bump in the road, but I don't believe he killed the project. It's hard to get in touch with the original devs these days because they've mostly left the scene. I can't speak for them, but my guess is that with Serious Sam HD's release, Forever's days were numbered. The project was then dropped, and its small community moved on. From this point, I wanted to talk about its multiplayer. It would always crash upon loading with version 2.080, so yeah, I installed those old retail discs and patched it to version 2.070. This worked fine. I've played Serious Sam Forever's multiplayer several times since it was released. One thing the devs took pride in was their AI bots, and I remember this quite fondly from the mod. The first time I played, I wasn't actually sure if these were bots or real online players. That illusion would crumble the more you played it, but you gotta keep in mind that Forever's multiplayer formula wasn't too complex. Yeah, their programming was decent, but it wasn't jaw-dropping. They've managed to make a functional system here, and the effort is deserving of respect. It allows me to play this mod in a time where Serious Sam 2's netplay is less than serviceable. Once you've created a new session, as long as bots are enabled to fill in the empty slots, you'll then find yourself with a gigantic battle taking place in front of you. Prophets of Sam advertised the ability to play with 100 bots at once, but in the demo it supports up to 16. I did find this old developer video that shows this in action. Looks pretty ridiculous. On a map like this, at least, you really don't need 100 people. In the demo, you'll fight some familiar community faces like Ryerson, Finzi, and Rumpled Foreskin. I'm sorry, was that one of ours? I have a positive outlook on this overall. It's much like Unreal Tournament or Quake 3. Honestly, had this been a full game and released years earlier, it could have stood as actual competition. It came bundled with 4 maps, 2 for deathmatch modes, and 2 for capture the flag modes. There was at least one more map being worked on for the full release, but it was never finished. Crashed Ship is a cool deathmatch map. It has many visual similarities to a fan-favorite Call of Duty map called Afghan. Desert Temple is a familiar map from the first encounter. It's nothing too special, but a classic that does the job well. In Capture the Flag, you have Ancient Worlds, which is a well-made knockoff of Unreal Tournament's Facing Worlds. You can't beat the tried and true layout of this one. Suburban Warfare is the second and last Capture the Flag map, which takes inspiration from the first encounter level's Suburbs. Regardless of the map or mode, you'll usually be spending your time jumping around like a buffoon, as do the bots. The experience is remarkably fast-paced, chaotic, and exciting. These days, the most attention Serious Sam Forever seems to get is for its unique weapon models that modders have ported to most Serious Sam games since. Not every weapon has a unique model, half of them reuse either classic or Xbox assets. It's unclear whether or not those were placeholders. I always loved how these games use the Doppler effect. Yeah, a lot of the times it ends up sounding funnier than it should, but it helps to give some variety to the limited voice lines. Speaking of which, since there's only 2 available models for the demo, you're gonna hear a lot of repeats. If the Doppler effect doesn't make you laugh, the constant orgasmic moans being tossed around might. I have a vague memory of playing this when I was younger, and my mom had to double take to make sure I wasn't watching porn. So here's your lineup of weapons. You got the knife, which upon wielding makes you run faster. The Colts are useful in a pinch for finishing off weakened foes. The single shotgun seems to have no spread whatsoever, but is useful at close range. The double shotgun feels much like the classic counterpart, which is a huge plus. I never felt like the Tommy gun was doing much damage, but it's good for ranged attacks. The minigun? This thing tears through the competition. Anyone holding this thing has the right to be feared. The rocket launcher, much like the double shotgun, works as you'd expect. They managed to restore rocket jumping, which was absent from Serious Sam 2. The grenade launcher is great for trapping your enemies in narrow corridors. The laser gun is another great reflection of its classic counterpart, though it might do less damage than before. The sniper looks straight out of Sam 2, but fires much slower. And the cannon, well, it's the most rare, and your ammo supply is very limited. Backpacks won't even give you anything for it. If you're expecting this to be Serious Sam Forever's super weapon, well, it's not. The hitbox seems much smaller than the classic counterpart, so your familiarity means nothing. The balls make contact far less often, instead bouncing off terrain or completely missing the target. One time I had decently charged it up to fire, only to find I didn't even kill the enemy I had hit. Look, I'm not a Serious Sam Deathmatch pro, but I think this is a bit unusual, right? It may penetrate targets, but you'll be damned to find a scenario where that even matters here. So as with any project mid-development, Serious Sam Forever has issues. More consequential stuff than the size of ammo crates, of course. One thing that often affected the gameplay were the bots. They usually do a great job, but I made note of several moments where their choice of weapons didn't make any sense. For instance, I often found players running towards me with a knife from a questionable distance. They also tend to have one-track mindsets. If you interfere with them, they'll usually respond to you, but not always, as you can see here. It's a huge shame that Serious Sam Forever never got finished, or at least had some additional content to keep it going. Still, what they gave us is pretty generous for a demo. I had a blast exploring and fragging through each of the available maps. The main component of Serious Sam Forever was supposed to be its single player. Unfortunately, we never got to try it for ourselves. At least, not until recently. A community member, Zim, eventually posted the motherload files on SeriousSite.ru, which had all the unfinished single-player levels included. Unfortunately, they don't work out the box. A modding friend of mine, Kingass, managed to re-enable them and sent me the files that I needed. The available levels are from Hatshepsut to Karnak, so a majority of the game is at least present. Unfortunately, of those 10 accessible levels, only 3 of them are seemingly finished. Anyways, the levels I could complete were Hatshepsut, Tomb of Ramses, and Karnak. The rest either had just a small selection of spawns, or were completely empty, like Moon Mountains here, which hadn't even passed the concept stage. From what I played, there isn't much to say. It's the First Encounters maps, ported to Serious Sam 2. They reused a couple of enemy models from the base Serious Sam 2 game, like Clears, Arachnoids, and those Easter egg Gnars, but for the most part, new models were created. They had a proper beheaded cast, marsh hoppers, werebulls, biomechanoids, reptiloids, and lava golems. In a few levels, I found these unusual side areas that didn't exist in the original game. I think this was to be part of what made Serious Sam Forever unique, to bring more action to these familiar locations. Unfortunately, none of those areas which I found were populated with enemies. Now for my opinion. I had a fine time blasting through the 3 finished levels. They've managed to seamlessly translate the original gameplay into Serious Sam 2, which no doubt took a lot of time to perfect. Maybe before Serious Sam HD existed, this would be kinda cool, but now it feels pointless. The game doesn't look much better than Classic as it reuses many assets from the original. For what areas have been redone, they don't shine much in comparison. Simply being inside Serious Engine 2 is another novelty at best. It's always difficult to critique a beta. I'm just letting you know, should you be interested in this, that you're not missing out on much. In retrospect, the multiplayer was the most interesting thing about Serious Sam Forever. I actually recommend giving that a try with bots, or friends if you can end up getting the online to work. For how much I've studied this mod in the last 2 days, I feel like I still know so little about it. Was the first encounter portion so incredibly unfinished that it shouldn't be judged as shown? Would Serious Sam Forever have a future after this was completed? Would they eventually implement the second encounter levels? Unless one of the old developers wants to chime in with a comment, we may never know. Last year in April, Croteam released Serious Sam 2's 2.090 update on Steam. This project of theirs would have never happened if it weren't for the influence of DwK, who was at the helm for this one. He did have the assistance of a few others, one of which, Sashex, created his own mod for the game, and we'll be talking about that one in the next part. A lot of people who previously didn't care for Serious Sam 2 have played this update and now consider it enjoyable. As someone who was never fond of this particular title, what did I think? It's not bad. As I'm sure you've picked up on, the update features dual wielding, or at least it does if you prefer it to. Before starting a new game, you get a wall of options that you can choose between. I had mentioned this earlier, Serious Sam 2 was once intended to have dual wielding. However, it wasn't something you had constant access to. Combo weapons, as referred to in-game, were a power that would enable the player to use dual wielding for a limited time. It was scrapped as they couldn't finish it before release. Supposedly there was also a power-up called Serious Disco that would have enemies dance on spot. That'd have been cool to see. So now the question is, will constant dual wielding in this new update break the gameplay? This is an official update, remember, not a mod. It's initially concerning as they have an actual disclaimer for this. Otherwise, there are enemy multipliers, rocket jumping, sprinting, and the ability to remove the game's useless lives counter. I should also mention they brought back the beam gun, again, only this time with the proper color. This thing is really overpowered. Even as a single-wielded weapon, I feel this breaks the game. Yeah, I'm not gonna suggest you use this unless you have enemy multipliers turned on. That looks totally ridiculous, and I love it. The control scheme they've gone for with dual wielding is largely similar to Serious Sam 4's, but the keys have shifted around a bit. Press the Z key to raise a duplicate of your current weapon on the left side. As per usual, the number keys or mouse wheel will be used to change your right side weapon. To change the left side weapon, follow those steps while holding the left Alt key. Should you want to remove the combo, press Z again. This is necessary for using the sniper rifle's scope, which, speaking of, much like the Serious Bomb, should only be a single-wielded weapon. In Serious Sam games, when you got a sniper rifle, unscoped damage is pretty much useless, but scoping it amplifies the damage considerably. Playing the game with dual wielding enabled takes a bit of getting used to. After all, this is a fast-paced shooter and you need to do a lot of quick thinking. It's a more fast-paced experience now than before, since you've got tons more firepower. Naturally, this made me more comfortable with taking risks. I suppose this might depend on the player though. If you're wondering about how the game was rebalanced, I don't think it was. About an hour after playing, I realized that they didn't need to. The second weapon does not add more ammunition, because the count was already balanced back in 2005. The biggest difference you're going to come across now is the time spent playing. You'll be shooting faster, and as a result, killing faster. Now even walking to the next area doesn't take as long anymore since you've been given the ability to sprint. Instead of adding proper run animations, they've opted for increasing the weapon bob as you move. It's a bit odd, but it works. Brings my attention to something else though. When dual wielding, these weapons take up a lot of screen space. View models will alter slightly upon doing so, but it isn't much of a difference. Personally, I feel they should have gone with what InSamnity 2 did. Speaking of InSamnity 2, in that mod you'd shoot both weapons with mouse 1. In the new update, you'll use each mouse button for the corresponding weapon. It is a blast. A number of changes were made to the game's weapon lineup. Previously, you were unable to reload the Colts, a function which did exist in the classics. I always hear people say they never used Serious Sam 2's Colts anyways, so who cares? Well, to that I say, there's a reason you didn't use them. Why bother concentrating on how many bullets are left till the reload, when you can use something else instead? The funny thing is that, if playing this mod as intended, now even with the reload function the Colts have become useless once more, because the zap gun is now dramatically improved by the introduction of dual wielding. Like the Colts, it has unlimited ammo, but it never has to reload. At least players who opt out of dual wielding will be able to use the Colts as intended. Now maybe they could find an actual use for them. But who's gonna bother with that anymore? Because after experiencing this upgrade, you'll be hard-pressed for a reason to go back, especially considering how many of these levels feel like they've been sculpted with dual wielding in mind. For example, do you remember the Shaolin Temple? You know, with all those giant purple balls? They throw so many of these at you, and by using just a single weapon they can easily overwhelm. A single shot from your double-barreled shotgun isn't enough, but with 2 of them in your hands you can take them out like a snap of your fingers. Now this fight actually feels balanced. Let me take a moment to appreciate the Uzis. These weapons were dual-wielded in the base game, much like the Colts. Now, instead of firing both asynchronously, you can fire each at once with both mouse buttons. You'll probably need to try it yourself to know for sure, but I promise you, these are far more satisfying now. There is a downside to this though. For some reason, now without combo weapons, the Uzis shoot really fast. Compare this with the minigun, I don't think this was intentional. For anyone wondering what happened to the grenades, they're still here. They've been remapped from mouse 2 to the middle mouse button to accommodate this new functionality. This game is just loaded now. There have been a few other changes to the game, mostly cosmetic things like restoring the functionality of those screens attached to some weapons. I don't remember if those ever had a purpose in the game's development, but one thing that comes to mind is maybe using it as an ammo counter? That would have been a cool way to modernize the game's HUD. They did something similar in their VR games a few years ago. In conclusion, I like this. Now, I'm not going to say this like it's a bad thing, but it is still Serious Sam 2 at heart. The gameplay formula was unlike the former and future games. This update doesn't change that. What it does do is change the game's pacing, which I believe it has excelled at doing. Every time Serious Sam 2 gets updated, mods have the potential to break. With the vast amount of changes that were made for this update, more mods have broken with this patch than any of the previous ones. If you want to load up old mods, you'll have to opt into Steam's previous version beta feature. But in some cases, you may still need to find an old disc copy. So, there you have it, the DwK mods. Or at least that's what I could find. There is one other mod that almost certainly involved him somehow, and that would be Classic Serious Sam 2. This modification was developed using the SDK files, which we only know of DwK being in possession of. Confusingly, the mod was developed by someone else completely, and I wasn't able to find any traces that link this developer, Buddha Master, with DwK. Maybe someone out there watching right now will know about this and chime in with a comment on the video. One can only hope, right? Either way, Classic Serious Sam 2 is a very strange mod, and it's one that we'll be covering next time. So stay tuned for part 2, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.